Hello, I'm Super Orange Cat, and boy, do I have a whopper of a video for you today. This is a Toonami news update for today, October 18th, 2024, and we've gotten a lot of new information just today specifically. So let's go piece by piece and put it all together. So the first thing I want to bring to your attention is Toonami lineups. So on November 2nd, we already know that Invincible Fight Girl will have a 1 hour debut with 2 episodes at midnight and 12:30. However, we have a newer, rather an old show coming to the block. Your eyes are not deceiving you. Blue Exorcist will be returning to Toonami for the first time in over a decade. Well, early 2014 it last aired. Last time it aired a new episode, which again we're just doing reruns because it's a long show, was back in March of 2013. And yeah, I mean, you can see the rest of the schedule here. It is a daylight savings night, so you have to do weird things. We fall back an hour, so we get an extra hour at Toonami, and that will be used to re-air the first 2 episodes of Invincible Fight Girl again. So not really a creative use of it, but a use whatsoever. And again, Blue Exorcist being a quote unquote new show to the block means probably kind of confirms what we've been saying or been thinking for a while, that Toonami might not have that much money and they're looking into cheap ways to fill the block. And I suggested a few years back that if they needed cheap ways to fill the block, go a little retro. Get an anime that people might want to see again and put it on Toonami. Or definitely one that would have very cheap rights. And I think the decision of Blue Exorcist wasn't necessarily because of like being specifically well received, but the fact that it probably was very easy to get or very cheap to get the rights back on Toonami. And we'll have it on that night at 1 a.m. And in a moment, I'll go into November 9th's lineup, which has its own little surprise to it. But I'll just cover the rest of this one. One Piece at 1:30 a.m. And then we have an hour of reruns of My Hero Academia. If you haven't seen the news yet and you see the step up My Hero Academia, you might be excited about what's going to happen the week after, but you're going to be a little disappointed. It's not My Hero Academia season 7 debuting on the block. What we get instead is the anime called Mashle, or am I pronouncing it right? Yeah, Mashle, Magic and Muscles, I think is a subtitle to it, right? I had to look up this title a few times because I keep pronouncing it wrong, but Mashle. And this is an anime from 2023, last year. The anime itself kind of went on with very little funfare. I mean, by synopsis, which is basically there's a magic school. This guy wants to show that, oh, I can do this with muscles, not necessarily magic, you know. And that's kind of the plot of it. If you're aware of the anime, it might not be because of the anime itself, but because if you've been on TikTok or YouTube Shorts, you might be aware of the Bling Bang Bang Born. I probably murdered that Bling Bang Bang Boom meme that came of it, which was a thing for a little bit. So if you hear the OP, you might hear something very familiar if you've been paying attention to TikTok or YouTube Shorts over the past year or so. But yeah, but the lineup, which will be, I guess, our quote unquote normal lineup starting from November 9th, will be Invincible Fight Girl, Mashle Magic and Muscle, Blue Exorcist, One Piece, Dragon Ball Z Kai, My Hero Academia, again, still rerunning season 6, and we will start with the top of a rerun of the dub of Rick and Morty, the anime. And again, honestly, the general response to the schedule from what I've seen online is pretty negative. And there's some people like, oh, Mashle or oh, Blue Exorcist is coming back. But the overwhelming response is, where's My Hero Academia season 7? It's one of the few anime that people do wait to see the dub of on Toonami. It's a show that has definitely been proven to get great ratings on Toonami. And let's just look at what we have now. We have Invincible Fight Girl. Some people kind of compare it to My Adventure Superman of like, well, we got this thing that wasn't supposed to be on Toonami. You got put on Toonami, but it did fairly well enough in ratings. I don't think this show would. This show really was just a show that was meant for Cartoon Network. People, they looked at and like, might be a little bit too violent because Cartoon Network, they're definitely kind of dropping the age on that a bit. I mean, I could go on a rant about Cartoon Network all day. Long story short, I'm not so sure something like Adventure Time, regular show, or Steven Universe could be put on Cartoon Network today, or at least given new episodes today because it might be just a little too violent or just be a little too mature content, for their standards. I think Invincible Fight Girl kind of fell in that same category. And really, it's going to feel like they just put a Cartoon Network show at midnight on Toonami. I mean, and Toonami has done that before because, again, Toonami was a Cartoon Network block for so much of its existence. But when you're throwing it at midnight after like a rerun of, I don't know what exactly airs, like a rerun of Rick and Morty or a rerun of American Dad, it's not going to quite feel right. And that's why I think people are going to come to the realization on Invincible Fight Girl. You have Mashle, which, I mean, I could compare this to like Zom 100, anime that people are like, it's pretty good, but not necessarily, appointment viewing or the type of show you talk about at the water cooler. It's a fairly serviceable anime, but nothing special. Nothing that's really, I feel like, gonna make Toonami necessarily a draw. Same thing could be really said about Blue Exorcist. People are like, oh, I like Blue Exorcist. But are you necessarily gonna watch Toonami because Blue Exorcist is back on it? You know? And Blue Exorcist, I don't know if it is on streaming, but if it's on streaming, I feel like you've probably already watched it on streaming since it aired on Toonami again. So I'm not necessarily sure that will be a big draw. One Piece is One Piece. We got Dragon Ball Z Kai. I mean, ever since Dragon Ball Z Kai's come back to the block, we haven't had ratings to see if people would show up to watch at 2 a.m. for it. Oh, I know back in the day, like 2017, 2018, it got insane ratings when it was put at the front of the block, but I don't know anymore. And then you have reruns at the end of the block, and reruns are reruns. This does ring like a pretty weak lineup, all things considered. I mean, it there's nothing that really grabs my attention in this block, you know. But other news, and you might know that this weekend is New York Comic Con, which is part of the reason why we got these announcements now for, next week's schedule. We got Blue Exorcist back, we got Mashle, Magic, and Muscle. But also, we got actually a debut preview of Lazarus, the Toonami original that will air sometime in 2025. And I watched it. I watched it right before making this video, and it looks fairly alright. Animation's kinda jank, but I guess with all the stuff that's gone on with Uzumaki at this point, I think people are gonna look at animation of a hawk's eye regards to Toonami originals now. At least I doubt there'll be like a drop off in quality from the trailer to like, episode 2, but who knows? I'll try to watch that when that debuts. And they say sometime in 2025. It looks fairly alright. It kind of looked like what would happen if you fused Jason Bourne with Minority Report, for better or for worse, It looked alright. And the other news, not really new news, but one thing I've been tracking is you might be familiar with a website called Anime Corner. Anime Corner runs a somewhat informal poll each week of what was the best anime of this week. And although, of course, there's many flaws with that format in terms of reading it as objective, at the same time, I feel like you can glean some real insight about the general anime viewers' opinions about various anime, where they rank them among others at that certain time. And one thing I've been following has been Uzumaki. Of course, after the first week of Uzumaki, it was number 5 in the rankings. Albeit it was kind of an awkward week because most fall anime in Japan hadn't started yet. So, of course, there are very few anime that was being voted on. It was like 5th out of 22. Well, 2 weeks later, we now have 69, I guess, anime that's under consideration. Again, it's a very informal format. And it fell all the way to 36. I just want to put this in perspective. So you have this anime people have been waiting for 5 years. And what little information we got about it was look how amazing this animation is. Look how great it's going to look. It's going to win awards and stuff. And then here we are. It's actually airing and it's considered a bottom half seasonal anime. I mean, that's not ideal. I could tell you that right there. And what I couldn't help but to notice was to look at some of the other anime that was in front of it in the standings. Like, for example, I'm not going to pull it up here. I didn't screen grab it, but I'm just reading out loud some anime of note up here. The first thing you'll notice is number 1 is Bleach Thousand Year War Part 3. Bleach being something everyone way back when remembers as an Adult Swim action staple. Some people are like, maybe we get it on Toonami. The answer is an emphatic No, we never got it on Toonami. Another one I immediately noticed was the fourth ranked show this past week, that being Dandadan. Dandadan, of course, doesn't have any footprint on Toonami, but it's kind of been one of the bigger manga the past few years or so. And definitely, if you watch Dandadan, you could definitely see how it would be the type of show that would totally fit on Toonami. And some people are like, maybe it gets on Toonami. Again, money. We're not going to get the rights to the hot new show, especially with how very well received Dandadan has been so far. And of course, if you're going to be very dour on it, you could point out how kind of the second half of the first episode probably would cause a lot of controversy among Toonami viewers, considering how a lot of people react to that inevitable scene that happens every Sword Art Online season. I digress. But other anime I noticed, and one I want to bring attention to, anime I'm shocked never got Toonami, was Sword Art Online Alternative Gun Gale Online. Now, basically, it's a lot to explain about the show. Just imagine Sword Art Online, but the main character is a young girl, basically, and it builds on that. It finished 29th. And I'd be like, well, that's not that great a ranking, but it finished ahead of Uzumaki, which means there's probably more people who want to see something Sword Online alternative, Gun Gale Online, than Uzumaki. And considering how much money we spent on Uzumaki, even with the budget costs that Warner Brothers Discovery forced on them, yeah, there's no way Toonami made money on this. And again, and I'm just looking at these for shows they could have had on the block. Again, we're not getting Dandadan, too expensive. You know, we're not going to get Bleach, too expensive. But those are two shows that are doing gangbusters right now, at least in terms of their reputation so far this season. And then even Gun Gale Online 2, a show which people don't really talk that much about in the context of Sword Art Online, but it's still getting better. The opinion of it's apparently better than that of Uzumaki. And that just shows that Konami's overall strategy of these originals, which they throw their own money in, and they get co-produced with usually Production IG or some other studio in Japan, probably whatever bargain bin cheap studio they can get in Japan at this point, is clearly not working because it's not just Uzumaki. Remember, one of the first things Brothers Discovery did was write off multiple Toonami originals X tax write-offs. And the thing is, by US tax law, you cannot do that unless you can prove you actually lost money on it. Which means even with how well received Shenmue was and Vampire Princess, which I know a lot of people are like, well, it wasn't that good at the end. And I disagree. I thought it had a great ending. It did not make Toonami money. They lost money on that. And we don't know what it was with the 4 Toonami sequels at this point, or Fully Cooley sequels on Toonami at this point. I bet most of you forgot that we just had 2 last year. Well, mostly because they're 3 episodes long each. But because they're completely unremarkable. Like, for example, without looking it up, can you tell me who the main female character was in Fully Cooley Grunge? And don't say Haruka, that's cheating. Who is the girl whose father was the swordsmith? I'll give you a hint. Her name was inspired by an Enya song. I personally love that Enya song, by the way. But again, that just shows Toonami originals just aren't working out. And again, I thought putting Blue Exorcist on the block, although you can be like, well, it's because it's a cheap option, might not be a bad strategy at all. I could see Blue Exorcist leading some type of indirect revival of Toonami, but only if they go all in on this, like get as many retro anime as they can. A lot of people nostalgia for the 90s. A lot of people nostalgia for the 2000s or the aughts or whatever people call it. Delve into that. Embrace that. Yeah, you could say you get the hot new anime, and if Dan somehow falls on your lap and screams banana at you, sure, put it on the block if that somehow happens. But I mean, just imagine getting the rights to, and again, I don't know the exact status of the rights to shows, like a Yu Yu Hakusho. We already have Sailor Moon. We have it on Toonami Rewind. Shows like that. Throw that on the block. Something like Cardcaptor Sakura. Throw that on the block. I can see Toonami, like, just do what you do with Toonami Rewind and put that on the main Toonami block. I could see that working and working very well. And maybe getting Blue Exorcist is an indirect sign that Toonami Rewind is doing fairly well, or it's hitting what expectations they had of it. I think Toonami might be better served by just going all in on that strategy. Yeah. But what do you guys think? Leave your comments, leave your opinions down below. I am Super Orange Cat, and that is all.